What if engine modes were disabled in F1 2020? So this video idea came about then from actually Twitter when I tweeted the Formula 1 game account and sort of asked if they were going to make some F1 2020 updates, the changes they've made during the season. One of those is of course completely disabling the use of different engine modes throughout the race weekend. And I was sort of wondering if they were going to, maybe update the game and force us to be just on the middle, the standard mode maybe. And interestingly, Ben Daly actually replied and said, "Leave the engine modes in, please." Which I thought was a really interesting reply. It quite surprised me, actually, because I didn't think it was going to make much difference. I'd rather it's quite realistic. Ben's clearly quite against it, so I thought, okay, let's give it a go. Let's disable the engine modes for everyone, including the AI. Let's have a race to see what difference it makes. Now, we're on Brazil. I'll explain why once we get into the race, but this is a result of qualifying then. Just a one-shot quali. I am Lewis Hamilton, hence he's not on that leaderboard. But as you see, it's made quite a big difference to the lap time, the absolute lap time of the Mercedes, at least. Mercedes is about 0.8 of a second slower, which is probably a bit more than it is in real life, but that's because I've just used the standard. I've used Mix 2. That is what everyone's forced to use. I wasn't able to increase the power slightly over the kind of standard race mode like Mercedes have done in real life. And that's mainly down to engine temps. It's just a game thing. So, but, everyone's got the same, so it doesn't really matter. Nobody can change the engine modes. But quite a significant difference. It's had a very slight effect of bunching up the field by only about maybe 0.2 or so there, down to 10th place. It's about maybe even a 10th difference, so not a lot at all. Now, in this video, the whole video is I'm going to show you both point of views. So once again, the top one, we are using all of our engine modes, and the bottom one, we are using none of them. So you can see I'm just playing around with them there in the bottom right, just to show that they're making no difference whatsoever. And in a minute, I do leave it on standard for the whole race. And on the one on the top, of course, we are playing with it the whole time. Now, getting into the reason why I use Brazil then, I use Brazil because that's quite an interesting case study, I think, for the engine modes. Because actually, Brazil, I would tend to always run lean for almost all of the in section of the track. So from the top of the hill here, run lean all the way pretty much to the long straight, and then run rich on all of the straights. So there's quite a stark difference in engine modes throughout the course of this lap. But of course, when they're fixed, you're just always running standard all the time. You're not changing them at all. So I thought this was quite a good case study. And I want to see as well, of course, we're starting on the back of the grid because I want to see if there's going to be any real difference in terms of overtaking. Now, you can see at the moment, we're actually in a very similar position, dive bombing there on both the engine modes disabled and engine modes enabled, and there's only one position difference at the moment. On the bottom there we're in P14, and at the top there we are down in P15, but one overtake does that away, so we're now both in P14 for both of them, so it's not made much difference to the first lap. That's not hugely surprising. I will say as well, ERS overtake mode is still enabled for now. Now that is because that is realistic. The drivers are still allowed to use ERS overtake mode, but again, it is ERS only, which just happens to be how it works in this game anyway, but it's ERS only, so the overtake button in a real F1 car cannot affect the actual internal combustion engine performance at all. It can only affect the ERS charge. So yeah, but other than that, they've just got to be the same engine mode for the whole weekend, from practice right the way through to the race. The only time they're allowed to change it is if their lap times are 20% slower than what they would normally do, as in qualifying. If it's a cool down lap, they're allowed to change engine mode there, and that's just to allow the batteries to recharge so that they can really go for it on their quali lap. But of course, again, the engine modes can't be changed on the quali lap, so the software either needs to be quite clever to use more because it's got more charge, or they need to use the overtake button a bit more. And of course, all the ignition timings and all that sort of thing, the mixture, fuel mixture is all exactly the same. That just cannot be changed full stop. The combustion engine really is very, very fixed. The only really slight changes you can really make are to the ERS. That affects anything anyway. A couple of exceptions. You are allowed to change engine mode on an in lap and an out lap. Again, that's probably to prepare and recover from a pit stop. But anyway, then back to this race again. We're making the same overtake here at the same time, somewhat amazingly. P11, just making overtake. You can see, look on the top there, it was a little bit easier. Just a little bit easier. Now, we are against different cars, of course. It's not a perfect world. But now, hopefully, this lap, we will be both against the racing points. We've got an absolutely perfect test here to really, really give a good comparison. Now, from my experience of actually driving this, I will say it made very little difference. Very, very little difference. Okay, it was very slightly easier to overtake when I was able to use my fuel modes, because I was able to manage my engine temps, because I could cool the engine like I'm doing there. You can see in the top right, I'm on lean for the midsection. That's cooling the engine down, making it nice and cool, ready for a full attack mode down the straight. And of course, going up to rich as well enables more power, so it's a bit easy to overtake. Now, of course, if the car ahead is using the same engine and uses the same rich mode, it makes no difference. But a lot of the time, the AI, might be cooling the engine or whatever. Online, this would make even less difference because, everyone's pretty much doing the same thing online anyway, but the AI are a little bit different to that. So actually, I found it didn't really barely make any difference at all. It was all pretty much the same. And of course, what it actually meant was it was a lot more accessible. It's a lot easier to drive because I wasn't thinking, oh god, where am I going to rich? Where am I going down to lean? Is my engine too hot? You know, am I going to overtake? Do I need to defend? When am I going to use it? Etc. Etc. I was just driving. I was just driving, and that's what you get in the F2 cars on this game. You know, there is no engine modes in F2, and it's the same for this. And I quite liked that. I think I preferred it. And as I said, it wasn't excessively detrimental to the racing. It made it a little bit harder, but actually it's the same for everyone. DRS is still, you know, the same amount of power. You've still got the overtake ERS, so that's no different. So actually for me, I think this would be a good change for Codemasters to make to the game. Now, just to get a little bit technical on you here, not really technical, but a bit more detail on you, let's put it that way. In the game files, the Mercedes and Ferrari engines, again, remember Ferrari have pretty much got their, we're going to call it their cheating engine, their kind of OP engine, if you like, in this game. They've not actually kind of nerfed them, if you like, down to kind of, well, what is now the worst engine in F1. So Mercedes and Ferrari have got pretty much the same engine. So they both produce, I think, off the top of my head, it's about 800 horsepower. I think it was 590 kilowatts, which is what the game files use. They produce exactly the same power at the exact same revs, right? Then the different fuel modes. When you're on standard, that uses exactly that. Oh, as I go very deep at the bottom there. When you're on rich, there's 3% increase in your power. And when you're on max, so in qualifying, there's an 8% increase in your power. So quite a big difference there between quali mode and normal, you know, rich or even a normal race mode. The Renault and the Honda are also almost exactly the same in this game. Again, producing about 10 kilowatts or so less power. I think it was something like that than the Ferrari and the Mercedes. And exactly the same, so when you're in standard mode, that's exactly what you get. When you're in rich, you get an extra 3%. However, in qualifying mode, you get an extra 7% power. That's down from 8% that the Ferrari and Mercedes get. So what I've effectively done here is I've leveled out the qualifying mode ever so slightly, which is probably what's happened in real life, but again, very, very slight. You know, that 1% difference is something like 8 horsepower. I mean, it's not. It does make a difference. You know, if you told an F1 driver, hey, do you want a free 8 horsepower? They'd be like, hell yeah, give me the 8 horsepower. So obviously they're going to want it. But it doesn't actually make a big difference. And now this is one of the differences you'll see. See, I've quite easily there cleared the McLaren on the final lap of the race with my engine modes available. However, on the bottom, without engine modes available, I have not managed to clear him. And I've finished one position further down. So it does make a difference. But actually, offline at least, it makes it a bit more challenging. It makes it a bit harder. You know, DRS does what it's supposed to do, really. It only really gets you alongside the car. It doesn't get you straight past the car. So anyway, guys, that's a bit of detail for you. I hope that was kind of interest, because obviously, you know, we're doing all these mods. I do often dig quite deeply into the game files and learn a lot about exactly how it works and you know where the power peaks are and you know what the different fuel modes do and stuff. So hope that's given you good insight. But as I said, actually in terms of leveling out between the engines, it's not made a huge difference. 8 horsepower in quali, nothing at all in the race. So there's still a 10 kilowatt hour difference between the kind of two classes of engine, if you like, Mercedes and Ferrari versus Honda and Renault. But anyway, guys, hopefully you enjoyed that video. As you can see here, this is the race result. So there's about a second or so difference at the end of the race. So not a huge amount in the race. That's what we expected, because, you know, there is a very little difference, really, a little bit quicker. We ended up in more or less the same position. Fastest lap is more or less the same. So actually, in the race, it makes a very, very little difference. To summarize, to me, the only real difference, if you were to disable engine modes in F1 2020, would be you go a bit slower in qualifying, and it makes it very slightly harder to overtake in the race. But it simplifies things hugely, and it makes it more realistic. So Codemasters, if you're watching, please do disable engine modes in F1 2020. I'm sure it's quite an easy change to make. Let me know what you think in the comments, guys. If you think it should be disabled, or they should keep it enabled to be more realistic, or maybe just to, you know, maybe you enjoy the engine modes. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new, and I thank you for watching. Bye-bye.